And I think, it was interesting reading between some of the similarities between her and Kurt Cobain today. Kurt Cobain was actually fascinated with the Forever 27 Club. He talked about it most of his life. And he really thought he was going to be a member of the Forever 27 Club, which of course he was, by his own hand. But you can also sort of think about this as a number that many musicians are familiar with. And I think I was talking with somebody today on a radio show, and we were talking about why that is. I think you could look at it a couple ways. 27, normally you've probably been doing music for a decade or so at least, and you have, in these cases, enjoyed some fame and the spoils of what comes with that, which is drugs and the ability to buy whatever you want and find pleasure however you want. And at a certain point, addiction is no longer just sort of a part of adolescence. At 27, I think you come to the cusp of adulthood, even in today's sort of delayed adolescence, and realize you have a pretty good roadmap of what lies ahead. You've tried a lot of things on for size. You've probably had your heart broken a few times and broken a few yourself. Occupationally, you've definitely worn a few different hats, but you have a pretty good idea of where you're going usually. And you can see where the future's going. So I can putting myself in someone like Amy's shoes, having gone through this kind of bipolar life where, yes, on stage she is sort of idolized and people really recognize her work. She won 5 Grammys. But that is just such a small part of your life. The rest of your life is going through this psychological discomfort. And that is just kind of being absolutely uncomfortable in your own skin. And in Amy's case, that was eased by the pain of doing drugs, which is not just Amy's case. All of the members of the Forever 27 Club had this pattern. And you're looking at it as in terms of sort of hypersensitivity as well. You could take slights very personally, as thick-skinned as they may appear with their public persona. It often is just a public persona, and what they are internally is something very different, very shy, very vulnerable. But that's not what the world sees. So in Amy's case, I think you can look at a quote by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I've used this in many different capacities, but no man, a woman in this case, for any considerable period, can wear one face to himself and another to the multitude without finally getting bewildered as to which one is true. And I think that's true. I think that when you're in the spotlight like that, you know, she is in some ways a prisoner of her own image, being the rock star chick with the tattoos and the kind of interesting look she has, and the self-destructiveness and sort of the pain and angst in her songs. And that's an image she had to live up to. And again, just to throw another quote out there by Alfred Adler, the greater the feeling of inferiority that has been experienced, the more powerful is the urge to conquest, and the more violent the emotional agitation. So in this case, I think this fits perfectly, because it speaks to what she accomplished, but also the feelings of inferiority. You know, frankly, she is a bit different. And she probably had a sense of herself as being very different. And I think one way you can look at psychological health is, where do I belong in the world? And this applies to anybody. And when you don't feel a sense of belonging in the world, in somebody like Kurt Cobain's case, for instance, the Forever 27 Club is where he felt a sense of belonging in the world, which is sort of fascinating. These people that had died were the only people that he really felt a certain kinship to. And it's very, very sad. And one wonders how Amy understood that. We don't know at this point, at least yet. I mean, facts are still coming out. But I think an interesting question always in psychology is, what are we running towards and what are we running away from? And one could guess some of Amy's comments is, despite the song Rehab with its lyrics that obviously everyone's kind of made a joke or commented on that in the last few days, but she clearly, by some other quotes, really wanted to be clean. So I have a feeling we're looking at some kind of cognitive dissonance here, which kind of describes where people have two opposing thoughts in their head at the same time. One being, I need the drugs and I need this lifestyle. This is what people want from me. This is what people expect from me. And on the other hand, there's this sort of shy, vulnerable person that just wants to be left alone and wants to pursue something else. But in her case, she could never find that peace. And that's the image the more I have looked at her life the last couple of days, is she's a person with very, very little peace in her life. And again, you can sort of think about this in terms of resilience, frustration tolerance, and creativity. They have a very interesting relationship. Frustration tolerance, when something bad happens or something doesn't go our way, some people really just roll with the punches. In the case of an addict, often drugs or some kind of escapism. That's what it is. That's what addiction is that escape from reality. And in her case, it was a very, very sort of almost, I don't want to use the word violent, but a very significant addiction. One that I haven't really seen, except for maybe in Chris Farley's case, who I've also written about. But we're talking about like a very severe level of addiction here. So much so that at 27, her lungs had already been partially destroyed, which really speaks to how much toxicity her lifestyle really consisted of. And I think it's always also interesting to consider the neurological piece, because over time addiction does something to the brain. It really toys with the way that your pleasure centers work. So, Guns N' Roses had a song years back, Mr. Brownstone used to do a little, but a little didn't do it, so I used to take more and more. And I think that kind of describes it well. And it sort of talks about the increased tolerance level and how we need more and more and more to get high and to have that chase that feeling again. And after a while it becomes very mechanical, and it almost becomes just getting to zero requires a significant amount of drugs. So in Amy's case, I think toying with sobriety for a couple years, oftentimes when someone comes back after a period like that, they come back full bore. It happened in Farley's case, and almost everyone I've written about had this sort of period where they tried to get sober for a while, but it just didn't take. And so again, after a while, prolonged drug abuse does lead to changes in the brain. It changes the neural pathways. So in this case, addiction and drugs are really one of the only things that bring you pleasure anymore, and life just does not seem worth living without it. Akin to have experienced a 10 many times on a 1 to 10 continuum, and sobriety is like living life at 4 or 5 all the time. Well, and that's certainly surviving, but it doesn't feel like pleasure. And especially someone with bipolar tendencies that is used to the swings anyway. And in a way, they sort of come to embrace the swings in a very odd way. And I know that sounds strange to say, but it's sort of like the devil is more familiar than the one you don't. So in her case, she went back to what she knew. So it's a very sad story, and again, the facts are still definitely coming out here. But I do have the feeling we're going to find that it was some kind of overdose, but I will certainly come right out and say I'm wrong if I am. But regardless, she had done significant amounts of damage to her body for many, many years. So she certainly had a hand in this. And so again, another tragic story. Another singer died at 27. I guess maybe one of the takeaways would be, if you see someone in your life like this, regardless of how much they're pushing you away or how much they deny they don't have a problem, there's still that very vulnerable piece of them that doesn't want to live like that. And it can be very, very tough to confront someone in those situations, because they're often very adamant about that, and they surround themselves with people that aren't going to preach or tell them that. But I think if you really talk to people that have come out the other side, they do need that person that says, I care. Sometimes a simple enough sentence as, I want you to stop. I can't stand the idea that you're killing yourself. And sometimes just having one person say that and genuinely care, you'd be amazed. Somebody that could be potentially loved by millions still needed to hear that from one person. So, again, a very sad story, but not, unfortunately, totally unexpected. But R.I.P. Amy, your music was beautiful, and hopefully we can learn from this. Okay, thanks, guys.